And let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I am extremely looking forward to doing that in person with a real flag.
Absolutely.
Someday, soon, hopefully. All right, let's do roll call, please.
Okay, Chairperson Jan Clark-Kretz.
Here.
Vice Chair Bonnie London.
Here.
Russ Kelly.
Here.
Jenny Nisley.
Here.
Maureen Valley.
Here.
Auxiliary Member Jean Wilson.
Here.
Auxiliary Member Ramona Brockman. And then I do not see Tim or Ryan on call so far, right?
Yeah, Ryan is not here, and I did text him there, but I haven't heard back from him.
Okay, thanks.
All right, let's move to committee comment for items not on the agenda. Does anybody have anything not on the agenda? And do we have any public comment on? Is there any public comment for items not on the agenda?
Any members of the public attending this meeting, if you just, you can go ahead and speak. You don't have to raise your hand. Hearing none.
All right, we'll move for adopting our agenda. And I will need a motion to do so.
I move we adopt the agenda.
And
I'll second.
I think I heard Russ
Okay.
first.
Okay. All right, Jan Clark-Kretz,
Yes.
Bonnie London,
Yes.
Russ Kelly,
Yes.
Jenny Nisley,
Yes.
Maureen Valley.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Now we have to approve our consent agenda. And is there any comments on our consent agenda prior to doing that from either our committee or from the public?
Any public members, you may just unmute and speak if you have any comments on the consent calendar. Seeing none.
All right. Do I have a motion to accept our consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Excellent. Roll call, please.
Okay, Jan Clark-Kretz,
Aye.
Bonnie London,
Yes.
Russ Kelly,
Yes.
Jenny Nisley,
Yes.
Maureen Valley.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Excellent. Now we'll move on to committee matters, and I will pass it over to Mary Beth.
Certainly. And I will just be brief so we can get on with matters at hand and turn it over to your technical staff, Mark Teague and Lucy Rollins from Placeworks. Welcome aboard, you guys.
Thank you so very much. And I will turn my attention to a PowerPoint that is very short today because we have a document to look at. All right, so this is our normal stuff. We've gone through the agenda. This document list gets longer and longer, and I feel for all of you that have so much reading material now that it gets kind of overwhelming at a certain point. If I might make a suggestion, it's good to skim some of that. Where it will become useful is when you start reviewing the document itself. This, of course, is our study area, and we'll refer to this as we're going through some of the discussion. And then, anyway, I've driven all of this and seen quite a bit of stuff in this area that will hopefully be useful today. Here are some of the comments. I can't say for sure that these are all of the comments because obviously this was put together before. We've had some comments that have come in since then. Some of these are interesting to me and be curious to sit down with these folks in a cup of coffee and find out what they're talking about. Some of these are, in fact, going to be very useful in editing the document. Some of these are almost written like policies themselves. I hire some of them for my staff. They're pretty cool. So we have this page here, and we have another one here. Comments about protected bike lanes. And one of the things that we've been hyper-focused on in our review of the comments is any specific requests for land use changes within any of the study areas. And there'll be a separate table of that for us to go through with the Land Use Committee. There haven't been as many as you would think, actually, which is a little surprising to me, given usually the general plan update, more people request changes. But we'll go through those separately. Mostly here, we're talking about policy changes and whatnot for the subcommittees to look at.
Mark, will we be able to go through those public comments one by one tonight, or?
We can, if you wish. We can do that right now.
What do you think, committee? Should we go through them? I think we should.
Okay, we can certainly do that.
Thank you.
And would it offend you all if I did this so that I can take notes on what the committee does? Then it will be.
No, I can read it just fine. Can everybody else?
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
That I can read.
Yeah. Yeah, the first one's funny because it's very true. If you're drinking coffee at the new Brew coffee place and all those people park along the road there, they're parking right in the bike lane. And it's
But there isn't actually a marking there. There's one down on Webb and Taylor. There's a marking, but then if you go on from there, it doesn't look like a bike lane. It needs another paint, just so people know.
Do we have one of those bike lanes that actually you park and the bike lane is next to it and people don't realize that? I mean, some places you can park and then the bike lane is next to it.
There's no line though to differentiate.
No, it's pretty much the bike lane.
I don't.
So, Mark, do we need to put something in our general plan that is solving this problem, or do we need to let somebody else know, or what do we?
Well, typically, we're talking about messing with parking in the downtown district, and I'll let you all figure out the politics of that. But if this is something that you would like as a subcommittee to recommend to the larger committee, this would occur in two places. One would be your land use element, but the primary place would be the circulation element.
Okay.
That's what would govern the type of road that you're dealing with.
Okay, so maybe we could make a note to our circulation committee that there are lines that are needing to be drawn and that there is an issue, but I don't think anybody wants to mess with parking,
So bike lane is unclear. Oops.
I was sitting at the coffee shop and a car went to park and a bike was coming through and the bike ran right into the car.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was. He ended up being okay, but he was a little shaken up.
Yeah, that's a newer, there wasn't a coffee shop there beforehand, so there weren't as many people parking on the street like that, right? I mean, it's only been in a year and a half. And so I think we need to get some more markings down there so people know not to park there.
Like a red curb, would that do it?
No, I just think another, white line that says bike lane, just like the one that's down further. It's just there's nothing like that up there.
Or you could.
So Mark, actually, there's two recommendations that I'm hearing, or three. One is the land use element needs to talk about clear bike lanes in downtown so that the bikes are separated from parking. Two, the circulation element needs to have that. And three, actually a message to the new public engineer needs to let him know that something should be done soon.
Based on our LGC presentation, last month on the downtown core and the photos that he provided, that Paul provided of that area. I did forward that comment to not only the town engineer, public works, and also the town manager. So I did put it out there. I don't know
already
what the
cooked?
resolve is.
Yeah, let it cool
But-
off for a little bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great. So the next one.
I agree.
Yeah, it would be nice to have an outdoor amphitheater by our library. Would be nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would think it's, I think the suggestion of putting though the Peter Oak stage is, I think that is too big for that situation. I think it needs something smaller in that sloped back corner would be ideal for something like that.
Right.
But not as overwhelming as Peter Oaks. Then you've got all the parking for a big venue.
Yeah.
Or if we can get connecting land to be making it a larger space in the future,
Mm-hmm.
that would be ideal.
Yeah, and it looks like Miguel's saying the same thing, and I would agree. You know, if there's an opportunity to purchase land around there, that we would recommend that.
The,
Isn't it still in the new the Grove, Hidden Grove? Doesn't that show park next to the library, just like the other one, like the village had?
Right. That's what I'm referring to.
Okay.
so you might, in August, it will be finished at the high school. They have a setting just about what you're looking for. That's being put together right now. I actually toured it yesterday. I'm on the committee there, and it's a beautiful setting. It's made with a lot of natural earth, so you don't have to pay for so much concrete. But it could be very nice back there because the trees are there, and there's you might take a look at that when you get a chance.
So what would you like to put in the, what would you like to recommend for the land use element here? This is really more public facilities than land use, but certainly we can include that.
So should it not be listed under our public comment then?
Oh, well, it could certainly be listed in public comment. It deals with the downtown. That's how it got here. Was a variety of shops and experiences. We try really hard not to censor any of this.
Okay.
It's kind of a twofer. One is the downtown, and the other is a library. And then they're talking about increased open space and pedestrian areas in the downtown. Those are clearly good policies. And you already have some of that in the general plan now. So
Okay.
from my perspective, I don't really see anything here to add, but certainly up to the committee.
Well, committee, what would we like to put here? You want to put something about the amphitheater, just a suggestion to the other committee, or should we move on to the next one?
I would
I thi-
suggest it.
Yeah, a suggestion of an amphitheater. I don't know that I mean, anywhere in town would be great, if this
Mhm.
isn't the right place, somewhere else too. Just a suggestion of one.
Sure. And there's a hand up from Carol.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Jan, I just wanted to mention back in front of the brew pub, some of our downtown parking actually allows for on-street parking up to 300 feet. And I'm going to get a better written of that description because it was brought into place when that brew coffee was done. I don't have it in front of me right now, but I'm going to get all that information. I'll get it all out to you guys tomorrow.
Okay.
For clarification, because it was specifically looked into because of they not only have the coffee shop in there, but they've got a couple other businesses in there. And in counting their parking stalls, part of that was on-street parking is allowable. But I just wanted to mention it to you that's how the brew pub, so that whole, it's not just the coffee place, but all the uses that they have in that little office suite. That on-street parking, it made like 5 extra spots or something, was actually counted in their parking numbers. So I just wanted to mention that to you, and I will follow up with more information to the whole committee tomorrow. But I did want to let you know that that is also something that was looked at, but I want to make sure, I don't want to misspeak it to you, but I want to know let you know that there is something that goes along with that.
Okay,
Okay,
that's great. Thank you, Carol.
not a problem.
Any other
Yeah,
committee members want to?
One of the things like that very first sentence should go and into the economic development element about having a variety of shops and experiences in the downtown. So Mark, if you could just make a note, that's where that statement should be captured. And then I think in the facility development and parks and recreation, the whole discussion of finding opportunities for, I don't know if you want to call them pocket parks or gathering areas, but I think that's important to also put into those two elements.
Okay. Great. Do we feel like we're done with this one, team?
I wanted to just kind of, I guess, put an exclamation mark on a comment that Mark made and Anders made about having more open space or public gathering spots in the downtown area, especially as we're beginning to intensify. Just to note that in that GC and TC areas, the mixed use is now up to 20 units per dwelling acre. So as we put more people into that space, I think there needs to be some release valves where people can also kind of enjoy.
Okay, so Bonnie, how would you add another sentence that just says, suggests that we follow up on any sort of opportunity to have a more public group? How would you want to word that?
Some public community gatherings or public spaces for, greenery.
Okay.
Recreation gathering.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't have to be very large in scale. It can be, pretty small. But just more opportunities, like I think Bonnie was getting at, is that people can, have the ability to and find spaces to go and have just a small informal gathering or a chat. That the benches and the tables that were added to the train depot area, I think, are great. They really helped with that. People can just feel comfortable taking their coffee or their gelato or something, and then just having not having to necessarily be at a retail space to enjoy those, that they can take them and still enjoy the town. And just build those into, little corners here or there.
Yeah. So I've been not so great about sending my comments in, and I guess I'll take the hit on that. But I have some comments, and just on that, what you just said, Ramona, when we did our leadership class, we walked downtown and we did some placemaking, and I've said it over to Sean over and over and over, and I'll say it here. I really think that area in the middle of the train depot parking lot is underused, where the bus station is, and I think that it could be redone where more public seating could be placed. So I'll get on the pinpoint thing and get that on there today. I really will. And then, and I guess to follow up with just that, before we go the rest of this, parking is such an issue right now downtown by the Ugly Mug and the Mr. Pickles, and then the Brew Coffee, and then across the street. It's really, really in the morning, people are fighting to find places. And really, ideally, they should just go over to the train depot and cross the street. But I was there today and I was looking at that. First of all, we all know that sidewalk is not the best to cross the street there. But also, there's not a very good walkway from the train depot to the crosswalk across Taylor, to the Ugly Mug or to whatever else. So I don't know where that goes, if that goes in circulation or that goes in this committee, but I would like that comment put somewhere. I'll type it in.
Actually, that's an implementation measure that could go to your public works director right now, because that's something that doesn't have to be in the general plan. It really is something that
it doesn't feel like you can get. It doesn't feel inviting to get out of your car and walk up Webb towards those restaurants.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, we do it, but it could, be improved upon because we have done it. We've parked in the train depot a lot and walked to Brew, knowing that was probably one of the easiest ways to park and get there versus taking your chances with being able to pull into Brew. To me, it's just easier to park where there's space and then walk to where you need to go to. But yeah, that area right there is getting a little bit tricky and a little bit busier than it used to be. Oh, and just to kind of tag in on the public space, there's the alley basically that's where the cycle place used to be. I think, and even the alley in between Pizzaiolo and Nelthorpe, I guess, is it? I know there's parking in the one, but I guess the question is would those be kind of interesting spaces to look at to utilize the alley space for either additional restaurant seating or some kind of a little gathering space? A lot of places are doing that and making their alleys kind of usable and inviting in between those buildings.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've seen that done and it looks really cool. Even in the smaller spaces, it looks cool.
Actually, Ace Hardware is looking at doing that between the laundromat and the drugstore to do something there in that short space, just to have a place for people to sit and talk or that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad they're keeping that fountain in there, the soda fountain in there in the main drug. That's
Yeah. Oh, the alley by the cycle shop is private property, not a true alley.
Oh, huh.
And then Miguel said in the chat too, that to remind everybody that you can park at the Blue Goose too. So he said that. Okay, so shall we move on to the next one? Everybody, we ready? All right, looks like it says we have a good mix of restaurants, don't need any more. I mean, I would welcome businesses to come in.
I guess it would belong in economic development, but I have heard similar comments though. And one thing that I think I've heard more frequently is that instead of the niche type shops, people really like the essential services. And I think Ace Hardware, that success is a good example of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the one question I have with this is, if it can be more or less flexible space, I kind of see perhaps, and I could be wrong on this, but to me, it seems like the succession of things is that when things start to get going, like getting more interesting and vitality downtown, like Loomis is getting because of its restaurant scene, that perhaps is there succession that turns over that as that kind of like leads you into getting really people interested in your area, that maybe as restaurants leave, something else that is a little more service or niche or retail can have a chance of surviving. Because to me, it seems that the restaurant industry is what's driving the interest in Loomis. And I kind of tend to agree. There's quite a few restaurants, but I've been to other places that have more restaurants as well, and it's super vibrant. So to me, it just seems to be that, is it something that we have to look at or not look at, or is it just something that over time and level of activity in a town as it gets to be more of a hotspot, if you want to think of it that way, that some of the restaurants just get replaced by something else anyway that does it good, that has a good chance of succeeding and being interesting. Does that make sense?
Yep, I think you're describing a market society. You are absolutely correct. I think Tim and Dirkos.
Did the restaurant fall through finally where Star Liquor was, and that guy worked on that so long? Did he give up on that, or is that still in the works?
It's still in the works.
Oh.
It is still in the works. A lot of different moving pieces, and with COVID and everything. I heard from Brian Nelson probably 3 weeks ago that he was getting closer to submitting his plan. So that's my status on it.
Well, he worked hard on that for a long time, so more power to him.
Yeah. Hey, Tim, I see your hand up.
Hey, thanks, Madam Chair. So as far as that comment, I mean, my opinion is that we don't have enough restaurants, but I really do think that you let private industry figure that one out. And I don't think that we should be putting barriers up for potential businesses. I do recall a conversation by someone who represented some people in the community not long ago, that they were happy with 50% vacancy in downtown and 60%, and they didn't want more people. And that's always stuck in my head, because that's like the complete opposite what you want to see as far as when you want to revitalize a downtown. They were happy. They just didn't want more people. They didn't want more traffic. They didn't want more activity, and so they're happy with 50% vacancy. I tend to disagree with that. So my position is that we ought to let private industry figure this out. If there's demand for more restaurants, then great. Let's pave the road for that. If there's a demand for more hardware stores, then let's get out of the way and allow private industry to figure that out. I have kind of a more specific comment as it has to do with the previous Star Liquor property. There's that bus stop there right in front of that property, and that's quite awkward. I think that we ought to consider, I'm not even sure people really use that bus stop, but town staff might be able to weigh in on that. But we ought to consider moving that somewhere else so that doesn't obstruct the egress of potentially that restaurant or whatever ends up being there. So, let's maybe consider moving that. Those are my comments for now. Thank you.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
That's a really good point. So do we just, where do we need to put that in terms of potentially moving this bus stop? Does our committee agree with that too? I mean, it seems like a logical thing to do. It's just where do we move it? And I think it is used from what I gather from PCTPA. So.
And I believe Brian Nelson is incorporating that feature into his building placement and using it as an opportunity for people to get right to his front door.
Oh.
He never asked for it to be moved.
Okay. All right.
At least not at this point. I don't, things change. But
So
I wonder if that was on his radar. It's one of those things like you don't notice it until it becomes an issue. But I guess the point is we ought to be open-minded about moving it if the applicant requests it and if there's not a lot of objection to it.
So from a land use perspective, if we ignore the anti-business aspect of this,
yeah,
there are some land use considerations that the committee might consider. So for example, some cities and towns would prefer not to have chain restaurants in their downtown.
Mm-hmm.
Some would prefer not to have drive-throughs in their downtown, leave those for freeway access. Although that does tend to cause some issues. For example, would you consider a Dutch Brothers? I find them to be a traffic nightmare myself, but it's a little hut. It generates a great deal of traffic. But those are the types of things that one might consider appropriate for the land use element, as opposed to basically, I often wonder when somebody puts a comment like this, if they own a restaurant, they just don't want any more competition. But all the comments here have been wonderful. That's something that the committee could consider is there a design element to restaurants that they would want to have a policy on for specific areas of the town?
What does the committee think about that? That's a pretty interesting notion.
Well, we already have a no drive-through downtown.
Yeah.
And we did have a Subway downtown, so I don't know that we have no chains, but I prefer not to have chains downtown.
Yeah, that's what the chain restaurants, I mean, I think that would be, if you plunked a McDonald's right in the middle of our downtown, how do we feel about that?
Well, they're going to have a drive-through already, which is we're not going to have, right? We're not going to allow if we don't allow a drive-through, we're wiping out a whole bunch of the fast food chains already.
Yeah. Okay.
Guess the question I have is, what defines a chain? Is it just, is it something that's like a national chain? Is it a franchise? Or, could someone own 5 or 6 restaurants? And,
Right.
Well, then Pizza Factory would be a chain if you
Yeah.
if you use that definition.
Yeah. Something smaller, like the Pizza Factory that's, it is a chain, but yet it doesn't really kind of come across that way, compared to like Round Table where everybody really. But I mean, it is my preference to have something more unique go in there rather than, but again, I don't, I think if you kind of limit it to the non-drive-through thing, that would probably kind of eliminate most of what you're not interested in. That you won't have a Kentucky Fried Chicken or something go in that area. Mm-hmm. That would just be not, to the traffic and the drive-through lanes and things like that just wouldn't fit in that downtown area. That would be something, like where the Rayleigh's is, where it's already there.
What about not considering national food chains?
I guess I would rather focus on, instead of saying we don't want any national food chains, period, I would rather focus something maybe on the looks of it, the appearance. What is the architecture? Do we make it look like it fits in, rather than saying nobody can eat any national food chain in our downtown? I think we need to allow for a mix.
That's true. I mean, McDonald's is probably in Paris somewhere and you just don't really know it, right? Because they told him it can't really look like a McDonald's and you can't drive through, you have to walk in. So,
Yes.
I think, the architectural appearance could probably lead to, being okay with what is in character with the town.
Excellent point.
If I could just state my position on that, I don't think I'm not hearing anybody jump up and down about a national food chain. However, the restaurant industry and the restaurant world is changing so quickly. I wouldn't want to tie our hands to say just no when you have, in certain circumstances downtown, vacancies that have been sitting for 10 years, right? What if those vacancies don't fit within a small business entrepreneurs type of business model, and only a chain could make it work? I mean, would we rather have a vacancy sitting for chronic time, for 10 years, or would we rather have a national chain come in and put up, set up shop? I just don't think that it behooves us to say no, to have just a fast rule that says no national food chains. I don't want to see them. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to see, national food chains downtown. But on the flip side, what if we can't get anything other than a national food chain to fill one of these vacancies? I don't want to be in that position. I don't want to see 10-year vacancies, which is really become the norm downtown right now.
So Tim, it looks like we have.
I would say.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just going to say, I know that we changed it to focus on design rather than business type, so it's not in there.
And I'd like to put 3 exclamation marks on that, in that I was going through, I think, the notes that Mark had about the general plan, and that we really don't have any design guidelines or standards. What is referred to as the town center master plan. And when you go through what those design guidelines and standards are, they're really pretty basic, pretty simple. So I think we absolutely need to I don't know, make that a policy, or Anders, would that be, what exactly would that be, have a design standards and guideline?
You can have a policy regarding the town developing standards and guidelines for the downtown or other areas of the town. I think early on, Mark kind of mentioned there's different parts of the town, and maybe you have different guidelines for different parts of the town, that would reflect that. So I think that's very appropriate.
Okay.
If I could just add there, I think that it would be a good exercise for everybody to go and look at those 3 houses that have been built on on Taylor next to Lorenzo's. And, you know, back in the day when the village was being proposed, everybody's like, well, those guys didn't ask for any general plan amendments. And look at those houses. Those are terrible. They're all the same. They're connected. They have, there's no lot line. And for people to say, well, let's just be frank. Our design standards are pretty low in Loomis, and we can do better. And to say
You're breaking up, Tim.
You know, that's just, you know,
Your phone's breaking up, Tim.
those are not attractive homes. All right. And so I do think, sorry, hang on here. Not attracted. How about now? Any better?
No.
Any better?
No.
How about now? No?
Yeah.
Any better?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I'll write my comments down.
Oh, sorry about that, Tim. Okay. So,
Madam Chair, Jesse Lunsford had his hand up. He put it down, but if he's able to speak, you can just unmute, Jesse.
Go for it, Jesse. I didn't see you. Sorry.
No problem. I didn't know what the rules were for public speaking in the whole 9 yards. As far as the mix of restaurants, demographics have changed in this, and we saw this through COVID-19. You can't have too many restaurants. The money now spent on eating out has gone through the roof in the last 10 years. People have changed from eating at home and which is eating out. So for restaurants, eating out, you can't have enough restaurants, I don't believe. As far as the bus stop goes, I'd like all of them checked. If you look down on Taylor near King, we've got one right in the middle of a piece of property that's labeled general commercial. If it could have been moved over 15 feet, it would have spanned the property line between next door and wouldn't have caused an issue instead of blocking the entrance to what could be a future business. So I think all of them should be checked. And as far as drive-throughs go, I'm in favor of keeping drive-throughs off of Taylor to begin with. I have no problem with national food chains or restaurants at all. But when you come to drive-throughs, if there's not enough room to pull people off of Taylor, you end up with a traffic jam. And with drive-through, you're not getting the people coming out, walking the streets, helping other businesses in the area. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Okay, so are we ready to move on to the next one? Okay. I'd like to see a revision of allowable uses in the ILT zone.
So this speaks to the edges that we talked about at the very beginning of our discussions. And I went out there and specifically looked at this area because this is in fact an issue in many communities. And there really is no buffer between the two. You literally have I would call them light industrial uses, but I don't live next to them, so I'm temperate with that. But right up against housing. And I couldn't tell because I didn't want to get out of my car and trespass, but I don't think there's a noise wall or any kind of attenuation between the two. It just looks like a normal residential fence and maybe some shrubs. And you can certainly see the buildings behind it. It just wasn't very well thought out, I don't think. And so I could see how a neighbor in that area would be offended by some of the uses that could occur there through no fault of the business owner at all. I mean, they're just doing what they do. And so, you know, this is going to be a sticky wicket to deal with. From a general plan perspective, we want to stay up high and talk about, let's not do this again. Let's talk about buffers and making sure that we have attenuation. And there are already policies in your plan that speak to that. But anyway, I did go out and look at this specifically because of this comment. And they're right. There's a disconnect there. In terms of updating the uses, I don't know necessarily that will solve the problem. The issue is noise and dust and odor and those types of things, which can literally occur with almost any land use. And we don't traditionally get in too deep into the weeds in land use. That's more zoning. However, it might be appropriate to review your zoning code to determine whether we have the right noise standards or the right nuisance standards, if you will, for this type of thing.
You know, Mark,
We're also going to have this for agricultural use too, so we need to be very careful.
Mark, in the land use element, it may be appropriate to have a policy about, I don't know if you say buffering, but a transition between uses, and just recognize when building permits come in, because that could be implemented with the zoning code, but I think it's appropriate the land use element does talk about that transition and buffer between uses.
Absolutely.
Like the edges.
In fact, buffers is in there, and I couldn't agree more.
This happens to be a situation that we inherited from the county with the light industrial already there and the houses, the subdivision already there. So what we have two different kinds of light industrial. We have the light industrial that's on the other side of Swetzer, and the ones that back up to the housing is limited light industrial, which we do restrict more and try to buffer as much as we can whenever a permit comes through for one of those uses. I think in the zoning ordinance probably is a place to review the exact uses. For instance, after our experience with the baseball batting situation and the noise from that, I think it would behoove us to review what we are allowing there. For instance, I don't think at this point I would want to still put in shooting galleries being allowed right there either. And there may be some other things that we should look at and kind of clean up our limited light industrial to help the neighbors there.
Yeah, that's excellent. Could we add that, Mark, to this comment?
Mm-hmm.
And then
I
also
have a question.
the buffer recommendation from Anders.
I have a question, maybe Jean probably knows. Is every use in that limited in light industrial area require a minor use permit or not? Like, does everyone who wants to put something in there need to get a minor use permit?
Mary Beth.
Yeah, go ahead, Carol.
Mary Beth, is everything in there, or some of them go in because they don't seem to be
by right?
Yeah, Carol, unmute.
Got it. Not all uses require a minor use permit in the ILT zone. There's a whole host of them that require it. Anything, vehicle sales, vehicle repair, whatever it is. If you look down the chart, there is a host of things that do not require a minor use permit. It's evaluated when the place is built, the amount of parking and stuff like that. So when somebody comes in, there's a host of them that require a minor use permit in the ILT zone. And there's a caveat right next to it that says if their parcel abuts a residential zone, maybe if it's closer to Swetzer, it would not require a minor use permit, but it requires a minor use permit if it abuts a residential. One of the discussions along the way has been, obviously not like they were saying, not at the zoning, not the general plan level, but at zoning, perhaps all of the businesses that abut the residential, new businesses coming in, require a minor use permit so that their noise could be evaluated before they're allowed. But right now, there's a host of them, and it's up on the screen here, that require, if it's got a P, if I'm looking down here, I can't even, this way too small for my eyes. But there are certain things, if you're looking down the list, in the ILT, a plant nursery is a permitted use. A medical analytical shop does not require a minor use permit. But if you come down to any of the manufacturing, media production, that all requires a minor use permit. If you look down, it's outdoor storage. It's a minor use permit with the caveat number 3. And if you look to the bottom of the chart, it'll tell you, so that's kind of how it's a use by use. It's not everybody, but in the ILT, any of the businesses that have the potential to create noise is evaluated through a minor use permit.
Okay. Thank you.
So is the minor use permit triggered with a change of occupancy or just?
Usually it's a change of occupancy. And so the minor use permit goes with the land like any of the other use permits. And so if a car sales, a car sales shop has been approved, then if somebody comes in and they're a like for like, they're not going to have to be reevaluated. But as soon as the use has changed, then we noted it comes in as a business license. And then our first evaluation of a business license is this a like for like, or is this a new use? And then we contact the potential new owners and let them know what the path is that they would have to go through to get approved.
Fair enough.
Okay. Any other comments about this particular public comment that we have? Let's move on to the next one then. So it looks like they're trying to bring a veterinary clinic into town and they feel they can't for some reason. Know what that means?
Yeah, what are you looking at? I've got this one.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. I didn't see. I just read it quickly.
The comment I'm seeing, Ness, is about main drug.
It's a main drag.
Oh, main drag. Okay. Look more carefully.
I did the same thing, Jean.
Expanding the topic.
I'm a little confused on this one. I mean, because we don't have a
Yeah.
CC zone as far as I know. Maybe they meant GC zone, but I think that would be appropriate to put in a GC zone. I think maybe they're thinking about the TC, which would be the town center commercial, is maybe what they're referring to, that maybe that they're a vet and wants to go in the town center commercial area, which would be really just the downtown, core of Taylor.
CC is,
So that's,
Ramona,
we do have
CC is
CC?
one of our zones. CC is
Where?
our central commercial.
central commercial. How come I don't see that? Where am
It
I missing
depends
that?
on whether you're looking at the general plan map or the zoning map,
Zoning
because
map.
the
Okay.
abbreviations and names were changed.
I see. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at a different map then. Okay. All right. So that helps explain it a little bit.
So we would allow a veterinary clinic in our town, Carol?
There are certain districts it's not. I'm just pulling up the chart right now to see what it is. We have certain zonings that it is allowed and certain zonings that they're not. So I'm looking at the commercial right now. Let me move the computer out of the way. So if I was to go to offices, that would be considered an office of some type. Let's see, veterinary clinic or pet hospital is not, it's allowed in the CG with a use permit. And it's allowed in the CT, which is the tourist commercial. It is not allowed in the downtown, the central commercial. And it is not allowed in the CC it's not allowed in the commercial office or the central commercial, but it is allowed in general commercial and it is allowed in the tourist commercial.
Okay. I think, Tim, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On this item, I would say that we ought to just be a little more flexible on something like that and allow for veterinarian hospital to come in. I mean, if we're trying to drive business to town and have a diversity of business activities, we ought to be a little more flexible, or a lot more flexible, especially, again, I keep hammering this high vacancy rate that we have, but we ought to not be so picky about what can go and not go here and there, if we are really interested in bringing more business and energy to the downtown. That's my comment.
Yeah, agreed.
maybe one of the things that we need to do sometime is take a look at the CC and the GC and try to figure out why each of those was put in one category or the other, and if those are still the categories we want for them. And then we might have a better handle on what we might want to change as far as what's allowed.
Mhm.
There may have been reasons not to have that, and I don't recall offhand what that might have been or not.
So what I've seen in other codes and what I've written in codes is differentiating between a hospital where you would have overnight stays and boarding, which requires outdoor runs and things like that, from essentially a day clinic where you would take your dog to get cat to get checked up on and shots, and sort of a wellness clinic. Mainly because one requires more space and has noise and has all sorts of things associated with it that might not be considered by that community as appropriate for their downtown. It's entirely up to how the town wants to do it. Usually veterinarian clinics don't want to be downtown because it's expensive space. It's a low overhead type of business, and it requires more space than you would think to allow for folks to get their pets in and out. It's like you're not going to see a large animal vet downtown, no matter what happens, for those reasons.
Well, we already have one of the world's most renowned big animal clinics here in Loomis, but it is interesting, and I like Jean's idea of maybe we can make a note to do, or I guess you already did, investigate the uses in our land development code and try to find some history. I do think Miguel put in something in the chat that he disagrees with having a vet clinic downtown. I don't know, is he on the line?
Yeah, he's in attendance.
Do you want to talk, Miguel?
Sure, can you hear me?
Yes.
I could see one going up at the far end of Taylor Road where the feed store is. But if they're talking about putting one downtown, let's say where the old mill site is, that's prime commercial property for retail or those kinds of uses. And I just don't see it being feasible. Now, if they're talking about up at the far end of Taylor by Del Oro, that's a different story.
That's a good point.
And that area is zoned general commercial and would allow for that use existing currently.
Okay.
Ramona?
I tend to agree. Downtown and the real downtown core center area. I mean, personally, I don't, depending on what kind of vet they're talking about, to me, I would almost think that a veterinarian owner of a vet center wouldn't really want to be in the downtown center core, just because of, I would think, their own concerns of, people have to drive their pet, their animal, and they'd want close by parking. You'd have to leash the dogs. There might be bigger dogs. So it doesn't seem like it would, to me, I wouldn't want to have that kind of a location myself, but just right outside of the downtown center core area, I could easily see that, happening towards the feed store, or towards the other end of town where it is general commercial. I mean, that's just my personal thought on it. With, even if it is a small animal care center, people might bring in, 2 or 3 dogs and cats at a time. There are multiple pets. I know people walk their dogs and stuff downtown and things. You just see it not being the best location, but then again, to me, it seems like it's kind of questionable depending on the size and the nature, and if it would be overnight stays of pets or not, because then they would require, some outside dog run kind of spaces.
Yeah. All right.
Would we rather have vacancies, or would we rather have a pet, like a pet clinic and small?
I'd rather have the vacancy and put something that belongs there, Tim, because I think there are spaces to put
It's not
it.
our call to put something there. It's private industry's call to put something that might be feasible or not. But
we can we can decide not to put something there, and just to say, well, if you don't let the vet clinic there, it's going to be vacant. I think that's a short-sighted view too.
Well, that's what we have right now. We have vacancies that have been around for 10 plus years. And if we weren't so, if we were a little more flexible, then maybe we wouldn't have those 10-year vacancies. Those aren't healthy vacancies.
I think, Tim, the one thing to consider is what would you think if there was an animal hospital right next to Red's and you're eating dinner and you're hearing barking dogs and they're running around and you know what I mean? I can kind of see the point of if I was Red's, I wouldn't want a veterinary hospital right next to me because I would lose customers, but I wouldn't mind it down by by Del Oro. So I think that's what I think, I mean, at least that's what I would look at as a businesswoman.
I'm not saying there's not a better place for it, or there's always going to be better places and worse places to put something like that. Yeah, excuse me.
Miguel,
there are always.
I'm busy right now. Sorry.
Sorry. There will always be better places and worse places to put locations. But when you're talking about, these storefronts that haven't been open, it's like, well, do we want to put our nose up to just about anything that comes up? I think here's what I think. I think downtown's pretty darn desperate to fill vacancies.
Can I say something about that?
Sure.
Tim, because some of the vacancies that we've had over the past 5 or 6 years was basically the building owner's fault because they either were in some kind of situation they couldn't do anything about it, but it really, we had people wanting to go in there, they just weren't able to rent it out. And so maybe that's a different issue, but I don't think we had anything we could do about that the building just sat empty. Is there anything that we can do as a committee to put some sort of, I mean, I don't want to put any restrictions on a building owner. That's not where I would like to go, but for something to sit 8 years is ridiculous if the owner isn't doing anything about it, right? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
And I mean, I'm serious. The majority of buildings that were vacant were because the building owners are not doing anything. It wasn't because there weren't people. At least they were calling the chamber asking to get in.
When I think of vacancies, I think of the old mill. I think of the old Star Liquor. Those have been chronically vacant. I think.
Well, no, Star Liquor was vacant till the owner kicked them out.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason those type of properties couldn't be multi-tenant properties. And here's the other thing. What we see downtown right now is going to be the shops and the stores that are in there right now could be totally different in 10 years. Like, how long are the vintage antique shops going to be around? Are they going to be around in 10 years? Should we tie our hands to what potentially could be a different commercial climate in 10 years? What if those become vacant? What if nobody, I mean, it's not like they're booming with business, right? So what happens in 5 years when the industry has made a major shift again, like it does every 2 or 3 or 5 years? Do we just want to say, well, no, I think that Loomis needs to be way more flexible in its zoning than it has been historically.
Okay. But I disagree that we aren't flexible in some ways. The only thing that I've ever heard people being turned away was because of parking or ADA compliance. I mean, we had gyms downtown. We've had, we have an architect downtown. I don't think we're limited in uses other than the tattoo lady that couldn't go in with her eyes. But, I haven't seen it be so much the town as it is the buildings themselves and the building owners themselves. From what I see, but maybe then I'm not seeing everything.
And the parking, which is an issue that is to be addressed.
Right. The parking has been an issue forever. I mean, back to when Rick was town manager, we were talking about trying to fix the parking, and he absolutely said people couldn't go into the where Red's is because there wasn't enough parking. But that's kind of been changed because that's been changed. But anyway.
So if the pleasure of the committee,
Yeah.
There's already a policy in the general plan, both the current one and the draft one, to update your zoning code.
Okay.
I would suggest to you that this is really a discussion for zoning, not a discussion for the general plan.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, let's move on to the next one.
There's already a policy in your general plan as it sits today, but it is not very useful. It talks in generalities about shade and how that's a good idea. Many communities have gone to a metric, and one of the things, the constant drumbeats you'll see from me in the edits that I'm making to the plan is we need to measure this. We can certainly do 1 tree per 5 spaces. A more modern approach is to require a certain amount of coverage, shade coverage of the parking area, because developers have gotten crafty. We could put 5 trees, we'll put all of the trees behind the building, or in a small planter on the left-hand side, and that really kind of defeats the purpose. So what a lot of communities have gone to is a specific amount of shade coverage within a specific amount of time following occupancy of the building. And the nice thing about that is it is a measurable metric, and it's something that the town can bond for to make sure it actually happens. So that's the important part. So anyhow, from my perspective, I just want to let you know that you already have a shade policy in there. I would recommend to the community that we upgrade it and have made comments on that.
Yeah, my only thought, Mark, is we have the policy in there, but the actual metrics should belong in the code, not in the plan.
Yes.
Committee feedback on that?
I like it.
Me too.
Yep.
And Miguel, what do you think? I think you have your hand up.
You can
Hear me?
unmute Miguel. Yes.
I did. Okay. The town had the policy of 50% coverage on parking lots, and that doesn't work. You can look at Rayleigh's. The trees, the way they're grown in smaller areas in the parking lots doesn't work. The newer method is to maybe not have the shade coverage per se, but have bigger planting areas so the trees can grow. Costco in Roseville might be example. Seems like their trees grow, but you'll see so many, and I was involved in a lot of these in Roseville, where we required a high number of trees to be planted, and they just don't grow. Roseville Square, see all the trees died. A lot of the commercial developments along Douglas Boulevard, the parking lots, that 50% shade coverage, the trees, you can't get enough trees in that will really grow. So what they're doing now is they're taking a certain number of parking stalls and putting in one larger planting area so the trees will grow. So it's not really based on covering the parking lot with shade, but rather putting in a couple areas where the trees will actually grow. So that's the main thing now.
So thank you, Miguel.
Miguel's absolutely right. Commercial developers have learned that if they don't plant them properly or irrigate them, they die and then they don't have to be maintained. And he's absolutely right that larger planting areas, this is a design issue and a planting issue. So he's absolutely spot on. It's all part of the game. We plant the trees, they die, I don't have to maintain them.
So Mark, we should probably have a policy in there about appropriate planting and appropriate trees in order to get the shade. I wrote one of those ordinances back in the 70s, and it was based on, if anybody can remember, the nut tree. And the nut tree had 50% coverage on their parking, but their trees, it was an old orchard, and they kept all the orchards there, and then so it had a good planting area, but that was just awesome parking, especially on a hot summer day.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're seeing in some communities is we're getting requests to put in solar panels and make like carports, if you will, that cantilever over the parking areas. And that's kind of an interesting discussion. It's shade, it's just not a tree. But I don't know. That's a topic for another discussion.
Well, I think that it might be a good discussion for Loomis because, you know, with the wanting to maintain the rural character, you're probably wanting trees rather than solar panels.
Yeah. Yes, and as technology advances, solar panels are evolving every 5 years. So in addition to all that, does anybody else have their hand raised?
No.
Okay. Can we move on to the next one then? Should that go to circulation, or should we talk, I guess we should talk about that in terms of our area.
I think we already did that.
Yeah.
Correct. I think we did talk about a policy
Right.
about, you know, flowing bike trails within the downtown core, but that definitely this is a circulation element.
Okay. And then vacant parcel at corner of King and Swetzer. Oh, that corner zoned as general commercial. Do not believe this.
How about, Mark, with all these land use changes, I think what we want to do is get Jennifer to actually plot them on top of the land use diagram. And then once we get through all the goals policies, talk about the actual land use changes. I think that probably would flow better to have all the land use discussions at once.
Okay.
And good. And Mark just sorted the list from the 848 comments of people who want land use changes, and we haven't had a chance to get those plotted on a map. And I think it's important to look on the map and see what we're doing.
That's a great point. And it looks like the next 4 are the same type of questions or comments. Okay.
Sorry. So, not sure what that comment is about, but I will have that plotted as well.
Mark, we may have to look at social pinpoint. I have a feeling that was a pinpoint on a map, so probably need.
Yeah, Chrissy and I talked about there's a kind of a disconnect between the summary table and graphics, so we'll probably have to go back on some of those. So Jan, you had asked to actually go through the land use elements, and I have parts of that here for the committee to look at if you'd like to start to dig into that.
That'd be great. I wanted to let the group know too. I think it would be nice to keep our meetings to 2 hours because I think we'll start to go a little crazy after looking at all of the, you know, line by line. And I just wanted to, you know, we did spend a good amount of time on these public comments, which I think is really great. And then in subsequent meetings, Mark, we focused on the implementation and goals of our section. So yeah,
that's where I'm headed. So this is your land use elements. We have some things I want to talk about. Some of the other committees don't have this issue. We do because we are the land use element. Land use element is different than many of the other elements. We have definitions that we need to be concerned about. So I'm not going to worry about residential because that's primarily not the purpose of the subcommittee, although we can get back there. These are, this begins the commercial designations that we have, and there are some things in here that we'd like to talk about. We don't have a definition of certain things in here, but for example, some of the coverage, we're taking some of these things out. Any description on where these things are located, that's what the map is for. And so you'll see that deleted. You'll also see that we're taking the numbers out of the description. And the reason we've done that is that there is a discrepancy in your current general plan between the definitions as they're written and what the table says. We can't have that. There needs to be consistency between these types of things. And so what I would like the committee to talk about, not today, but to look at in their homework is take a look at these definitions and see if there's something in here that we should add as the types of uses. And we've had some of that discussion already here, but people do look at these. And this is used as a guide for the town council and the planning commission when somebody asks for a zone change. These are used to try to figure out whether it fits within the zone. So for example, here in the general commercial, it did talk about adding residential. I'm suggesting we link that to an existing residential density so that we're not making up a new residential density for each of the areas where we're allowing these things. And if we need to fix that. So the idea being, if you're going to allow residential uses within your commercial land use designations, that it's linked to a residential land use designation that we have. So if you have one definition, you're simply referring to
that makes sense.
And then the town center commercial, basically, we have a little bit of a language problem here. A couple of things. One, we need to have the downtown core area on the land use map because it features prominently in a lot of the narrative in the plan. Secondly, we need to decide what we're calling it. Sometimes it's downtown core, sometimes it's town core, sometimes it's downtown. We need to pick a label and stick with it. We don't need to do that this evening, but that's one of the things that's essential to what we're doing because then we can refer to it consistently. Attorneys hate it when we change terms on it. So,
and that is that your comment up at the top here? I gotta move the Zoom thing so I can see better. So you're talking about general commercial?
Right. So right here we say, okay, in the general commercial designation, we have this phrase that says that primarily serve local residents and businesses. And I don't think Tim's on here, but yeah, he's covered by my window. I have no idea what we mean by this. Do we mean that we don't want big boxes like Costco or Walmart or those types of businesses? Do we mean, in which case that's a design issue? We can limit the size of the buildings. Does that mean we don't want chains, which is a different discussion? Or does that mean what exactly? And because if you're going to welcome businesses to your community, you welcome them. If you don't want certain types of businesses, then we find a way to deal that with design. But anyway, I see there's a number of phrases like this in the general plan. And before I just willy-nilly go through and modify them, I need to know what the committee wants. That's why we're doing this.
Does anybody have any comments about that? Jean,
I think part of what's going on is not necessarily having to do with specific businesses, but more basically an old conflict between, do we want downtown to be for us and limit the traffic to just local people, or do we want to have the traffic of outsiders coming in? I mean, to put it in a crass way, that's kind of been an old kind of conflict. And some people have said, no, we don't want, Loomis is for Loomis people and the people from here, we don't want extra traffic, compared to the recognition that we want people to come to Loomis, even though it is going to mean some traffic. So it may not have had to do with buildings or the type of business per se, or the size of the building, although we obviously haven't wanted big box, but it may have been that kind of unspoken or sometimes spoken sort of conflict on, do we want outside people or do we not want outside people? And I hate to say that was part of what's been going on, but I think it has been.
Well, it is helpful to understand, the background, and that's what Mark was alluding to. But I think traffic is here to stay, and so I think things are different now in that regard. Any other comments? Mm-hmm. So, what do we think about? So, Mark, let us know what you've seen in other small towns. What have you seen? Do you have any examples of or advice?
Sure. Sure. I mean, I think you already talked this through on the downtown core, or the town core. I think that you really do want to have the smaller businesses and whatnot. I think in your general commercial, which would be at either end of Taylor Road and out by the freeway, I think I just delete that limitation and let the zoning and take care of it. Again, as you put, Jan, traffic's here. I had the misfortune of timing my visit to Loomis such that I got stuck in the Del Oro High School let out. And I will have to tell you that I flipped an illegal U-turn. I'm sorry, I flipped a U-turn legally, of course, to avoid that because I didn't need to see the high school, along with about 50 of my brethren to do that. But then 20 minutes later, I was able to make a free left turn from Oak Street onto Taylor without any difficulty whatsoever. I'm kind of wondering whether a lot of our traffic is local and it's folks doing what people do, taking their kids to school, doing their normal runarounds, or what it is. And I know it depends on different parts of the town, but traffic's here. Also, businesses changed. Local is now global. My neighbor sends her stuff all over the world, and she knits it right in her little sitting room. So, yeah. Anyway. I would definitely take that care. So there's a comment in the chat from Miguel that says general commercial should not be residential. That's what's in there now. So if we want to take residential out of our general commercial, then that's something the committee needs to recommend.
So examples of that would be mixed use where a business is on the bottom and we have a little apartment over the top, which seems like a nice use to be down in that area. What does the committee think?
Well, we just sent in the housing element, which has increased the residential density of mixed use to 20 units. So I think it needs to stay in.
Yeah.
Well, let's be clear. This is the general commercial. The town center commercial is the stuff that was increased.
Oh, that's right.
This piece is the general commercial. And there's what you described, Jan, was vertical mixed use, which is hard to do even in highly urban areas. And Loomis is not a highly urban area. But there's also horizontal mixed use where you might have commercial in front and residential behind, or you might have some combination of that. So when we say mixed use, and it hasn't been really well defined yet, we'll need to have that discussion as a land use committee, what we want that to appear like. Do we want residential to front Taylor Road, for example? That's a comment later on in this discussion. I'm not sure. We have some residential that fronts Taylor Road now, and there's some interesting things to go through there. So anyway, I just wanted you to put out, this is all text from your current general plan, just for the benefit of anybody that might be listening. I haven't added anything here unless I have it underlined in so if the committee wants to change this, then we need to make that decision.
I think Ramona had her hand up.
Yeah.
Ramona?
I did have my hand up, but I get the sense that we would kind of keep moving on. But I would argue not to take residential out of general commercial. I think leaving it in is just fine. You don't want. I'm not a fan of really pigeonholing single uses to zoning that it allows for the flexibility of different uses, and just a single use per zone is, I don't think, a good idea, not flexible enough.
Bonnie?
I mean, and this might be, again, more of a zoning issue, but in terms of the town center and central commercial area, because those areas are actually fairly small and there's not a whole lot of land. I'm wondering if those areas we recommend vertical part of the structure as opposed to on-site, because we don't really, there's not a lot of land to be able to put both a commercial and residential. I think you need more land space for that.
Okay. Miguel?
I concur with Ramona.
Thanks, Tim. Miguel?
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The thing with commercial. Now, where you want to have commercial on the bottom and residential on the top, that should be a different zoning than pure commercial. In spite of what Tim says about 60% vacancy, I don't see it downtown. We need commercial. You're looking at 20 to 30 years out, and we don't want to take the commercial that might be, say, around the library or whatever, the zoning there, and change it all to residential. You're going to have, so therefore, the only commercial you're going to have is what you have today in downtown Loomis, plus whatever goes into the mill. So that's not looking too much forward. I think there is some opportunities for some additional commercial downtown and not residential. Thanks.
Okay. So is there anybody else that has a comment?
Well, I'm thinking about some of the existing buildings that maybe there are ways that you can kind of sneak some residential in without it disturbing. I'm thinking of ways that you can do that without taking away the commercial necessarily. We do have existing buildings, which we're probably not planning to tear down, but work around for the most part. I think maybe we need to look again at what kinds of things that we would want and make some limitations or other kinds of regulations or rules or guidelines for what we would want if we were going to allow some, say, mixed use. I don't think we want to just say put an apartment building and use up our commercial that way, but there may be ways that we can work those things together without too much detriment to the commercial, which we do want to emphasize.
Okay. Mark, can you go back up to the top? And I just want to make sure that we're done with that. And does everybody agree to take out that primarily serve local residents? I mean, that seems obvious, but does everybody else agree?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so we're done with that then. And the town center commercial, and let's see.
So I have a comment here that says you have 35 feet is the height, although I will admit I haven't seen any buildings in the downtown that were very high. And it is relatively low. You also have a pretty low, we don't do a range of FAR. It'll be a maximum there. But so the question becomes one of, are you okay with the building height the way it is? Typically, we wouldn't put building heights in a general plan. We would deal with floor area ratios. We would deal with density intensity. This is the type of thing that would be in a zoning code. But it's in your general plan, and before we do anything with it, I want to make sure that everybody's okay with it. So it's low, but leave it to the committee.
Sometimes, Mark, things get into our general plan because we want them more difficult to change than simply changing a zoning ordinance.
I agree.
I'm not, I don't know if we should change it to any higher, but I would want to look at that, and maybe we would want to see some examples or something before we made a decision to change it.
Okay.
Yes, very wise, Jean.
We might have, let's see, are we talking about the one that can have the increased housing?
Yes. Yes.
And so if we have to have that density, we might have to look at what would be absolutely required before they could do that kind of density. We might need to see what we would need to accommodate to be able to do that.
So what we have here is a trigger for floor area ratio, it's not something we would typically put in a general plan again, with all due respect to Jean, but I understand where she's coming from. So you have a lot of buildings in the downtown that are fully developed. There's no parking and no room for parking on the property because it's all buildings. And so this would suggest that new buildings couldn't occur without some sort of other parking structure, which seems to be a bit of a stretch for the downtown, but not beyond the pale. Do we have a parking issue in Loomis, or do we have a lack of customer issue in Loomis?
Depends who you talk to.
Got it. My experience with downtowns, large and small, is the issue is, well, if they can't park right in front of my store, I'm losing business. Of course, your store is only on a 25-foot wide parcel and can only have one space, but that's a different discussion. So if we make it pleasant to walk around and encourage people to get out of their store, anyway, this is the type of thing that would trigger people not wanting to build in town or open up a business. So that's something that the committee should really think about a little bit.
Okay, so what would your suggestion be then, Mark?
I would suggest that we have a policy that has the downtown parking be considered part of your design discussion that we had earlier, and to evaluate opportunities to ensure development without requiring on-site parking. There are a myriad of ways of doing that. The town is invested in parking already. Your downtown is blissfully small and easy to get around in, so maybe we do something like that. And that would encourage people to occupy more buildings. Yes, there will be blowback, right? There will be pushback on restaurants, for example. Restaurants use an amazing amount of parking, but they also tend to do it in off-peak hours, right? So I don't know. I mean, there's always, this is a perpetual conversation in every community, everywhere. So it's not unique to Loomis. But I would suggest that we have a policy that really digs into that, and then maybe sit down with the stakeholders, those people that actually have businesses downtown, and see what they think. I'm looking at Miguel's chat, and he's probably right. My experience has been that there's almost always parking. It's just may not be, right in front of the store.
Right.
But we have to have those discussions before you can modify your code. I'm suggesting that maybe this sentence doesn't appear in your general plan. And if you're going to have this type of thing, it goes in zoning.
I see Ramona's hands up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with that. And with Miguel that, and we need to revisit our parking. There's too many restrictions with the parking in the downtown area that are preventing things from probably happening down there that would be really good for downtown. And people just need to, and business owners, I know they'll argue over it. And same thing if there's not parking right in front, but the reality is that's not really the way it goes. People, as long as they can find parking, they are willing and happy to walk. It's just a matter of, I think, getting people to recognize where the parking is. The lot behind the post office, I know there was an interest in one of the last comments to change that and to build something on top of that. But I think the whole parking in our downtown core area in particular, and even maybe into the general commercial, needs to be revisited and made much more favorable to allowing businesses to go in and allow, but as long as there is sufficient parking of on street or in other lots that may not be right immediately where you want to be, I think that's great. There's, the lot that is also like by Taylor's, that's a very large lot that fronts Taylor Road. That's one that I would question as to whether or not it needs to be a parking lot, or if someone wants to build on there. I think that would be definitely a good infill spot to add something either commercial or residential to the downtown area that doesn't necessarily need to be parking. So yeah, definitely something needs to be looked at with that. And I just want to give the one example that I do know of that really kind of rocked people's world in a sense of really understanding that a lot of communities, when they change their parking to being less restrictive, they actually do find that the businesses do better, that foot traffic really adds to people utilizing those businesses rather than, it's just kind of the opposite of what people think. I think one of the first places to do that was in conjunction with, which would be the Boulder Pearl Street Mall. They really had to fight hard to get that passed through, to close down a couple blocks because of the same thing. If they can't pull up right by my business, I'm going to lose business. And it turned out to be completely the opposite. The Boulder Pearl Street Mall is an amazing space that people love to go visit, and they do very well.
I think that the parking issue definitely needs to, be talked about in another conversation. And I would also say that we have an opposite problem of, we have some businesses that are holding a huge amount of parking and not allowing anybody to use their parking, and fighting with neighboring businesses over it. So I think this whole discussion needs to happen as soon as we get this general plan updated and can get on this. Just saying. I hear it all the time from the business owners. So
it sounds like you are in agreement to delete this sentence too, Jenny, then, sounds like. Is everybody on the committee in agreement on this? Anybody else have any?
Just a general comment, not on disagreement, but to keep in mind, one of the things that has changed significantly since the old general plan, is that we did not have the parking lot behind the post office. We did not have all the depot parking lot the way it is now, nor did we have as much parking at the Blue Goose. So we have significantly increased our downtown parking compared to when we wrote this before.
Right. And I think Miguel said that we have 500 parking spots. So that's a good point.
Cool.
All right.
State of the art is to decouple parking from development entirely. But I don't think we're there in our fair count. These are all just normal comments. Business park. Basically, I just took out the area that explains where it is, and that's really a discussion for the Taylor Road folks, Sierra College Subcommittee. This is the limited industrial designation that was talked about, and I understand, and maybe it just doesn't matter over much. I don't want to die on this particular hill, but there's really very little difference between the limited industrial and the light industrial from a general plan perspective. From a zoning perspective, I understand there's quite a difference, but perhaps just for the optics, we go ahead and leave it just the way it is and not change it. I don't want to rile up a bunch of folks for what is essentially just a duplicated land use designation. So there's this phrase in here. This designation is intended to provide for the evolution of the area over time to industrial uses that are more compatible with the adjacent residential uses. I'm confused by this because I don't know what it means. And if I don't know what it means, nobody else will know what it means. So can Jean or somebody, you have a little history here?
I'm trying to.
Do we have a map we can look at?
Sure.
This?
And in that text of limited industrial, the text is referring to light industrial.
This piece right here.
Yeah.
And so it talks about, this is light industrial, but it also, it's kind of awkward there. So we have limited industrial, and then we have
Mark, I'm not sure that what we're looking at in the text is what ended up things being called.
Okay.
It's like the downtown, the TC, and when we changed names. So we have IL is the light industrial and limited. So
this is the ILT.
I think they're both talking about different things that one got named light and one got named limited light.
So the way I've looked at this, and this is a good thing to bring up, Gene, is this is the limited industrial.
Yes.
And this is the light industrial.
Light.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm confused by this phrase in the limited industrial.
I think it's because of the noise issues, obviously. It seems that, because that area that Gene was talking about where the, where the batting cages are right next to the houses, I mean, there's definitely there's a tension there with that type of compatibility. So maybe that's why.
I agree
I
with
didn't
you
know
on
that
that.
you varied it. So that makes
And
sense.
possibly the size of trucks that can go down that road, right? The delivery trucks? Is there any restrictions on those?
The trucks really don't affect, I mean, other than I guess right here. And this was, I mean, there's, I don't know. I don't see big trucks going down here. Maybe they go out further. I don't have the rest of the map here. Maybe they come out here and.
Well, no, I'm saying that isn't it limited because they can't?
I saw plenty of big trucks. I don't know. Does the town have a limited truck route there? Andy, would you know?
I know that well, it's another conversation.
Go ahead, Carol. Carol has her hand up.
Mark, a lot of what they're talking to, and Miguel referred to it in the chat, when we inherited this dark purple area, the limited light industrial from the county, their uses were much more, or I should say much less residential friendly. And so when the town came in and they reworked it to be the limited light so that as old businesses that were the less residential friendly were leaving, that we were to be more, we had a higher standard for businesses coming over on that side of Swetzer, particularly the ones that were adjacent to the residential. And so I don't think it's as limited by or driven by trucks or anything like that. It is certain types of industrial. When you look at our manufacturing uses, only the light industrial is light manufacturing is allowed on the limited side, whereas the medium and a little heavier manufacturing is allowed in the IL. But as Miguel referred to, the evolution is taking what we inherited from the county, and as the businesses aged out, chose to move someplace else, we use this higher standard for the limited light industrial so that they didn't have as much dust, they didn't have as much vibration, they didn't bring as much noise. And it also, we're much more limited on their hours of operation on the limited side. On the IL, on the light industrial, many of those businesses can run their businesses 24 hours a day. Whereas on the limited light industrial, they really are restricted to 7 to 7. They really have to have special permission to be open on Sundays and that kind of stuff. And again, as Miguel and Russ also is mentioning, it was our way of taking what we were given and turning it into something that was much more suitable for our residential neighbors who also were already there. The residentials were there also, just like the industrial was. It just the county was less restrictive on their industrial use than we are for that area.
Fair enough. That makes total sense. Now I understand, and I can tweak wording accordingly. We went through here. We already talked about we're not doing a range. Is there any interest, and we're running into this in many communities right now. Logistics is a big deal. Is there any interest in limiting the total size of an industrial building in some of these areas?
It's pretty well built out, I think, for the most part, isn't it?
Certainly the limited industrial looked to me to be pretty well built out, but you have other areas. Hang on. I apologize. I hope that was open on another screen, but it won't. So I wanted to point out
Come on.
Because this is a general plan and we're looking 20 plus years, built out, maybe redeveloped at some point in time. So think ahead that what if somebody came in, bought all that, and then decided to build something else? So the general plan really needs to look beyond what physically exists today.
Right, and you have, and maybe it's a more generic discussion. This is the area we're talking about. Here's Swetzer. Here's, I can't remember how to pronounce that road, but there's the road that goes up this way, Gibbon. And so the question becomes when in most of these I consider temporary uses. And this is basically just RV storage. And so if somebody came in, and the question is, and there's no right answer, it's just whatever the town prefers, is there a limit to the size of the industrial complex that we would want? And really what that means is trucks. It occurs to me that your primary access to this area for the industrial development is through the middle of your downtown, which is probably not ideal, given the conversations we've had about traffic. If they don't like cars, they're really not going to like an increase in trucks. So it's something for us to think about. I don't know that we need to have a resolution this afternoon, but that is something that we would put in a general plan and we would talk about. But yes, you have, this is pretty much built out, but as Andy pointed out, all sorts of things can change in here. For example, this is mini storage, and I consider mini storage temporary, as do most planners, because they're there and they can be gone tomorrow. And this is the area with the houses that we were just talking about. So something to think about. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. It's simply the town's preference. And it's my job to bring these things up. So I will move on. Let's see, light industrial, we have limited this to 35 feet. A more common height is 50 feet. And also, is there any interest in the live work units in this area? Food for thought, I have no recommendation one way or the other. I think 35 feet is pretty low for a building, for an industrial building. They typically are in the 40 plus range, but that's entirely up to the town.
Madam Chair, Miguel has his hand raised from the previous discussion.
Okay, go ahead, Miguel.
Miguel, just unmute if you wish to speak.
Everything that was said about the history of Swetzer is correct, that it was part of the county. And so we're trying to mitigate the effect on the residential area. I think it's really kind of neat to say what we could do on Ripley. First thing we need to do is fix the road, but Ripley now mainly is becoming a storage area. But I'll argue a little bit with the comment that storage area isn't going to be around. Everybody and his brother has a trailer or a recreational vehicle. And in most communities, other than Loomis, you can't park them on your property. So you'll notice that the number of units that are being parked on Ripley Road now is immense. I mean, there must be 400 or 500 vehicles being parked there. And so I think you can see that for many, many years.
And you may be entirely right, Miguel, but they are temporary because it's just a large parking lot. And if somebody comes in with more money, I've seen these things convert, because you can, with a D9 and some gravel, you can move this anywhere. That's correct. So, but yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm in the market for a place to park mine. So, okay, not going to worry about public uses. This is the table. Let's get down to some policies. Down to here. Okay. Has the committee thought at all about whether you want to call it town core, downtown? Again, we don't need to know. It's just these are part of your goals, and I have some questions about how to do these things. But we do need to have a consistent term for how we're referring to parts of the community, so we can be accurate in general plan.
So Mark, can you just scroll up a little so we could see the whole, all goals?
Sure.
So this goal is for every element of land use, correct? Not just, I mean, yeah, so we,
So I'm recommending that these 4 here go to conservation because they really don't apply to land use in the direct context. They do indirectly in the general plan. But the land use element typically is directed at development, and the conservation element is typically conservation. You get the idea. So these are all things that are excellent goals and need to be there.
Gene, historically, would it be safe to say that those goals were repeated because it's so important to our town to have them there as a reminder? Do you recall?
I don't recall specifically, but looking at them, it could be that kind of thing. Basically, that if we're talking about land use development, we also want to remind people that that's not all there is to Loomis, that we're still caring about these other things. Now, protecting the groundwater and surface water quality, I don't know that, that doesn't seem particularly a development issue. We're going to have rules on that for sure. They do need, if they're going to come in and do any major development, they need to know that we do care about the trees, and they're not just going to go in and pull out a little permit and take all the trees down over a weekend, the way that has happened in the area, not in Loomis. Major landscape, we haven't had these things come up, but it depends on where the development ends up happening, I suppose. And if it's in areas that get developed that do have these things, we don't want them ignored. I understand putting them into the conservation element, but I think, Jan, you're probably right as far as we don't want people to not understand that we care about these things just because you're going to do development. We want you to realize we do care about these things, and we're going to basically hold you to it. So if you didn't read it here, we hope you understood that you needed to read the conservation element, which they may not have.
Just to let you know how the staff is reviewing projects today, we have an extremely lengthy Excel spreadsheet with every goal, policy, implementation, and we require the applicant to go through and describe how they're consistent with the general plan, how they're implementing the general plan. And so given that approach, they have to address every single goal, objective, and policy of the general plan. Beginning to duplicate them between elements is going to be a real pain for an applicant to fill out the application. And for the staff to review. So one, the staff, when a project comes in, they're mandated to have a project that is consistent with the general plan and compliant with the codes and ordinances. And that's how we're reviewing projects. So doubling up on things doesn't really solve the problem.
So they would have to go through the goals for each element.
That is, they do. Yeah, they don't like it, I will tell you.
I can imagine they wouldn't like it.
But we are forcing them to do that before we find their application complete. Mm-hmm.
And is that something new or over the last 20 years? Because it was duplicated before, it wasn't happening, or what's changed?
What's changed is we are, the state of California says you have to be consistent with the general plan. And so we are using this, one, to inform the applicants about what the general plan says, and two, to help the staff actually review the project application. So Mary Beth, what have we been doing this about a year now with the Excel spreadsheet?
Yeah, about a year and a half.
Right. So the intent is for consistency with the project review and to assure compliance and consistency with the general plan. And
that same spreadsheet also floats down to zoning code
Right.
for project specific, to make sure that they know how to comply with our zoning code, not only our general plan but zoning also.
I think Russ has his hand up.
Yes, ma'am.
I think as I look at these, and I think at one point it was thought if we wrote them down enough places, we would be able to find them. But I think the process that Anders is talking about has gotten to be much, much better, and to be able to produce what we actually want and what we need to check to be sure that they have done that. So I think that this should probably be moved to another part of our plan.
Okay, what about Jenny?
I do agree with what Russ just said. I just wanted to say something about the downtown core versus downtown. I think when I think of downtown, I'm thinking like right downtown on Taylor, right there. But our downtown actually goes down Horseshoe Bar some too. So when you start thinking about the downtown core, to me that makes more sense because we're not we need to include that part on Horseshoe Bar too. So wording wise, I'm just throwing that out for me.
Okay, does anybody have anything to say about goals 1 through 4? And moving them or keeping them, or the other option is putting it into a single goal?
Russ Kelly has his hand raised.
I'd like to move them.
Okay. Everybody else okay with that?
I agree.
Agree.
I agree.
Okay, let's do it then. Did you get that, Mark?
Okay, so might as well look at number 5. I'm not recommending any changes. It's still okay with the committee?
Yes. I mean, for me. That's the number one thing I think for all of our residents.
Yep.
Okay, and then we already talked about the town core. So one of the things when we bring back a map, obviously, Jenny will have to figure out as a committee what the boundary looks like so that we can all agree on it. But
Are there documents that we need to take into account that maybe name one thing or another so that things don't get confused, especially if you're going to include a whole bunch of documents
well, a couple of
with
things
the
about
general
that.
plan?
It's not our intent to include all those documents as attachments. We're going to take the policies and goals that are out of there, review them, and then they will no longer be referred to. Because that's part of the confusion is this. You have all these master plans, some of which were adopted, some of which weren't, and they're all being referred to differently. So what we'll need to do ultimately is have a single general plan, and then it will be the overarching governing document for the town. But part of our discussion is going to have to look at all the maps and all the discussions that are in those plans so the committee's fully informed. But that's
I guess we hadn't brought up to this committee, but the town attorney has written a memorandum and the staff has written a memorandum regarding the status of the 1992 town master plan, the 2010 master plan, and the Parks and Open Space plan. And also there are 2 trail plans. The intent is to incorporate all the relevant pieces of those plans into this general plan. And when we adopt this general plan, the resolution will say all previous plans are superseded by this plan, and we get rid of those because it has been causing great confusion for the staff when we're doing project reviews, and confusion, I think, within some of the town. People think they have different, they have or have not been adopted. So the 92 plan was actually incorporated into the 2001 plan. So the 92 plan was more of a reference document. The 2010 plan is a portion of the town master plan. It was adopted. And then there are 2 trail plans that were adopted in the 2016 circulation element. So the intent is to clean all that up with this general plan and then make sure this general plan supersedes all of that. So there's no more confusion.
There is a statement in our current general plan to that effect, at least as far as the 92 plan, that says it's that the concepts have been incorporated into the general plan and the other one is no longer valid,
Right.
except as a reference, except for design review, which we never got Never got that done. The council at one point asked the planning commission to work on design review, and we worked on it. Have a whole big binder of stuff we worked on, and then suddenly the council said, don't work on it anymore. So it never got done.
Yeah. And Mark actually found another reference to that town master plan that doesn't take that approach. So our intent is to remove the references to the town master plan and just make sure that we incorporate those things that are of value in this general plan update.
Okay, so we have this policy. This is just the pro-business policy. I didn't see anything wrong, or goal. I didn't see anything wrong with that. To attract development, land use, provide jobs, town residents, all consistent with town's character. Made sense to me as an overarching goal. I skipped over 6. So this is the overarching design theme of the current general plan, and it remains the overarching theme of this general plan. More intense in the middle, less intense at the edges. The only change I would make here is let's be precise about where we want development to occur and where we don't. And it may not be that it becomes town core if we take Jenny's input in, and maybe that's just too small of an area. Maybe we have another area that we define. Again, it's simply a matter of being accurate in our descriptions. And then on number 8, designate adequate land to accommodate new commercial and industrial development that is consistent with the town's character. I don't know what that means. If we want it designated, it's on the map. If we don't want it designated, then it shouldn't be on the map. If this is talking about a future use, then that's fine, but that's really not the goal. So I'm scratching my head. Personally, I don't think you need it. I need to leave it, but what is the community?
Gene, does this go back to that thing that the town was supposed to evaluate a portion of the town 2 years after the general plan adoption? You know, I know there was that statement.
Which number are we on here?
8.
8?
Mm-hmm.
That, as far as I know, that was only the Sierra College Boulevard thing. But the reason I was looking at number 6, and I think one of the things that we need to look at is that the definition of core, because we've been talking about the downtown core, but if you look at some other places, we talk about the concept of the core of Loomis being the developed part. And so when we, in 6, it says, while maintaining predominantly agricultural outside of the core, that they're not talking about Taylor Road and the Horseshoe Bar. They're not talking about the commercial core. They're talking about the concept of the core being intensely developed, and then we have less and less intense development, and then you go to agricultural. So I didn't catch that until just now, but I think that's because we obviously are not having agricultural just outside the downtown business core. So we'll need to figure on, think about that, because we've talked about the downtown core, the business part, but we also talk about the core concept of the intense development in with the subdivisions and things. Anyway, that's something to come back to, but I don't remember on number 8 that there was anything specific. That 2-year thing was specifically on Sierra College because the steering committee didn't get finished with it before they were told to turn it in.
And Mark, I recall you had some language we discussed about the kind of Toxac concept of, the fringes are very rural and how it intensifies as you come towards the center of town. So sounds like that language that you had drafted might be appropriate somewhere at some point to discuss.
Yeah, I have that at the very beginning right now as the overarching concept behind the land use.
Oh, okay, good.
Because I wanted it to be in somebody's mind before they read the rest of the document or do anything else. This is what the town wants, and it's based on that. from my perspective, I don't know that legal aid is necessary.
Yeah, that is, so we really don't have any areas other than, like Andrew suggested, if, well, it really wouldn't even be an issue if something goes out of business. Obviously, it's already commercial. Yeah. Anybody have any comments on this one? Do we leave it?
That might have referred indirectly to that Sierra College.
That's what it sure seems like to me. So
Area.
I think we need to probably rethink this and rewrite it, Mark. Or yeah.
Okay. Like I said, I had no idea what it's meant to be, because it talks about the future tense of changing a land use designation. Well, for heaven's sakes, that's what we're doing now. So if we need to change it, let's do it now. But
it probably went back to that whole issue that Sierra College Boulevard, they hadn't finished the review of that. So you're right, we're addressing it now. So that probably could leave from the goals.
Madam Chair, Miguel has a comment.
Sure, go ahead, Miguel.
Yeah, some of these policies don't belong in the downtown plan. They were just general policies for the whole town. And so it seems that if we're going to redo the general plan, only the policies that relate to the downtown element should be in this. These are general statements for the whole community as far as agricultural and preservation and things of this nature. But that would be an overall overriding general comment or policy for the whole town. But as far as the downtown area, most of these don't relate to the downtown area. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So given that, on number 9.
Did we, I'll rewrite and think, okay. Would it cause grief to the committee if when I talked to Andy and Christy and Mary Beth, if 8 went away? But we'll talk about that later. Okay. Number 9, this one's got multiple personalities. I'm not entirely sure. It just seems more business development and economic development than it does land use. But
sounds like that should go in the economic development element.
And this speaks back, I think, to whatever the conversation was earlier about not wanting more traffic in town from people that don't live here. And I think we've already had that discussion. So I think part of this would be carved out. And the way we would say this today is we have freeway-oriented businesses, regionally serving businesses is how we would phrase that. And then we would have locally serving businesses or smaller businesses in the downtown. But it wouldn't necessarily be limited. I happen to like going to Taylor's. I don't live in Lewis. So, and I think there's lots of people that fit into that particular category. It's because I like milkshakes. But from my perspective, I don't know that you want a reputation of being business unfriendly. I think perhaps we just want to deal with the design aspect, as the committee said already, and deal with it that way. But from my view, this would be better suited to be reworded and put in economic development and finance.
All right, committee, what do you think about that? Okay to move this to economic development?
I say yes.
Yes.
I agree.
Okay, any other comments on it? Any public comments on it? Okay,
None.
so I was just going to say it's been 2 hours and 7 minutes, or maybe a little bit less, and this seems like a good place to stop. I just want to encourage anybody else to, if anybody has anything to say, we've made, I think, a lot of progress. Hopefully we can come back and look at these. Now, Mark, how can we, is this up immediately, or are we able to access this on the website? How does it, it's not published then, obviously.
And it's really kind of a dog's breakfast right now of everything everywhere. As you can see, I mean, this is the way planners go through a document, and you can see how it's being deconstructed and moved around.
Yeah.
So if you want me to strip out the policies, goals and policies, things we've talked about, I can certainly get that to Christy and those can go up. But the rest of the narrative is still being drafted and isn't really ready for subcommittee consumption.
Mark, let it hang out there. Post it up, let people go through it, and
Okay.
Just let it hang out there, because I think this community has a good idea of what they've done and where they are.
Okay.
But make, what is this, version 1? I think fairly quickly in the next couple of weeks, let's go to version 2, which could be the cleaned up version. Because there's a lot of stuff in here.
Oh yeah, no, this is, like I said, it's a complete, it would be hard for somebody that wasn't deep into it to read.
Right. But I think the community is pretty deep into it. So let's publish this, but just have everyone aware that there'll be some restructuring because the new structure of the general plan has a goal, then the objective, then the policy, all in order, so you can see how they relate to one another. And that hasn't been done in this land use element yet. That's coming. So I would say put this up, let people review it, and then let's get the next version up, say within the next week or two.
And then we'll be able to see Mark's notes.
Yep.
Okay. Because rest
You'll
Kelly
see
just asked
everything.
that. And then Maureen, you had a question?
Yeah, I was wondering what the yellow highlighted designation was.
Oh, down here?
Yeah.
These are things I haven't gotten through yet.
Okay.
These are all, the colors are all my coding. So the green one were things I wanted to talk with the subcommittee about because they really deal with it. This green text means I moved it elsewhere into the document. It's just my color coding for editing. Things that need to be added. All of this is track changes. Let's see if there's any other colors in here. The pink just means there's a comment. So we'll have to figure all that out. So like this is just something I need to talk to Andy or Mary Beth about. These are outlines for me that I think there needs to be some narrative that talks about these things. These are notes to me as an author to try to figure out, make sure I don't forget things. These are some things that we've had as staff comments or things that have come from the committee that need to be added. You can see it's just an outline, not in any particular order. Let's see what else. Come on, Larry.
In other words, this document gives you a peek into Mark's mind.
Which is kind of a scary attic.
Don't worry about formatting and questions or comments of that nature. Just, go right for the heart of what we're talking about.
Yeah. So one of the things that frightens me though is version control. So if we have 97 people all in the same document looking at different things, it becomes very interesting to try to consolidate those comments. We need to think about that because that could really be a mess. So,
and then for our next meeting, though, we're going to pick up exactly where we left off, team. So be rest assured we will be going through all of the rest of the document.
What if we just got a paper copy of it? Would that be all right?
If you wanted one, I think so. Yeah, I think can they print it off or?
Instead of putting it on the website, just.
Well, I think we put it on the website because we are being transparent. Everything is being shown, but yes, you can print it from there.
Okay.
Actually, my guess is this will go up as a PDF. Christy, I think that's what we're doing so that you can read it, but you're not going to touch it.
Okay.
And Mark, welcome to the comments. I think Christy and Matthew have been experienced multiple comments on a document, and that's why we have the 849 comments. So yeah, we'll get through it.
I don't mind at all. The more the merrier. It's just, like I said, if there's 97 people, a document by committee reads that way, and it's not something the town needs. So we need ultimately to focus on the important parts and then deal with it later. So I want to make sure that the comments show up Oh, I don't like the way they did that. We have to figure that part out, Andy.
All right.
Because I don't like this because it isn't, it's a sucky PDF. So let me figure, you see how it's all here on the side? It's really hard to follow.
Yeah.
I hate it. So let me see what I can do elsewhere. And if we have to post the Word version, Andy, I don't mind. I just want to.
Yeah, well, that's true. The Word version, yeah, we'll just know that if the Word version is posted, people have to write their comments in the comment form and email them to us or put them on the social pinpoint, and we'll capture them that way.
Okay.
So,
There's no way for everyone to upload, so
no.
we would have to do that anyway.
The other thing, Christy, we'll have to do is put the line numbers on here before it goes out, so that people can refer to the page and the line and all that good stuff. So give us a couple days to get this formatted and ready to go up online.
Give us a week to get this formatted up online. I mean,
Mark is busy.
Yeah.
No, I'm just thinking mainly that we have a 3-day weekend, Andy, and I'll thank you very much, but I'd like to not work on this weekend.
Well, not to mention the other 16 committees that
Well, and Mark has a committee coming up in 45
we're on.
minutes.
So all right. Well, some of us have
another meeting.
Are we ready to adjourn? I think our next meeting is June 24th. Does Bonnie? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what I wanted to mention to all of the people that are here is I believe the town is going to be doing another community outreach. I'm still running into community members that have no idea this is going on. And so I'm wondering if you could give us the dates and the times. And I would ask that, everyone who's a member of the community, please share that out with your network so that they are aware and they can attend and they can provide some input.
Yeah, great point.
So that was going to be my wrap-up story. We are doing, no, you're good. We are planning on 2 community input events, one on Tuesday, June 15th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Blue Goose. It won't be a Zoom meeting. It'll be an in-person meeting. So the 15th is when mask restrictions and all that go off. So I think we'll be in good shape in that regard. We can pack that room. But it will be live streamed via YouTube, our YouTube channel. So if people can't attend, they can at least participate, watch, and still make comments, because that's our big goal here is public input. So June 15th, 6 to 8, and then Saturday, June 19th, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the depot. Same event, same plan, same live stream YouTube, but get people in there, get their comments, and go through the elements in each of, the meeting format will be the same, where we go through element by element and get that community input as we go forward. So we're going to have lots of comments.
It won't be line by line, though. It'll be element by element.
Element by element, not line by line, yes.
And the staff will stay after to answer questions. So there'll be some time to ask them questions.
And to answer your, just kind of to address your outreach concern, Bonnie, there is a door-to-door mailer that's going out to every residence. It's being mailed on June 4th to every mailbox and every post office box. It will be MailChimped out to 1,850 people who have access to the email system. It will be online, and it will also be posted physically at all 3 of our boxes. So
in addition to Facebook and a newspaper advertisement.
Absolutely. So the outreach is coming, Bonnie. It just hasn't, it takes a week or 2 to get things posted and have it actually show up and do what we need to do. But I just wanted to let you know that the outreach is definitely, there's probably not going to be a community member who does not have the opportunity to hear about it unless they do not go to their mailbox and they do not turn on their computer.
And were we still going to be doing a community survey? I mean, is that still the plan? Because it feels like it's kind of, we're getting towards the tail end of things.
Yeah, Andy and I talked about that yesterday, and we're trying to determine the best way to do that. I know that our social pinpoint program is kind of like a blanket survey kind of thing, because you can put ideas out there. You can pinpoint specific areas of concern. good things, bad things, all of that. But we're trying to figure out, and like you said, with our time constraints, how we can effectively negotiate that maneuver. So.
Because,
answer is yes,
like
me
one of
too.
the things that, that we're beginning to get a lot of kickback on is that we're probably losing at least 10 subscribers a day due to the volume of emails that they're getting. And they're calling us and they're saying, take me off your list. Take me off your list. It's too much. So there is a fine line between getting the best way to notify everybody and not completely bombard them.
Okay, so we'll talk about the survey, Mary Beth. I know you guys are talking about it, and I think part of the problem is with an individual part of the land use like this committee versus just a land use in general survey might be nice, but it would have to be more general in terms of information that we think, and maybe as a committee, you can start, think about some of the information that you would like to know from, if you had to ask every person that lives in our town a question when it comes to land use, and that could be put into a survey, let us know, send it to Mary Beth and Anders, and, maybe that's another way we can sort of format a survey, indicative of land use, and also obviously circulation and all that. But Mary Beth, can you please maybe add that to our agenda for a survey?
Yeah, and we're going to have to do the same thing with the other committees too, because of the individual groups that they are, the individual committees and the topics they're sensitive to. I looked, there was a 98, it wasn't even called a survey, it was a questionnaire, which pretty much hit on all of our housing stuff. But I didn't find anything that really dove down into other elements and things. And it seemed like that particular questionnaire, that ship had sailed. So that's why we're talking about how we can go forward. So any recommendations, anything would be great.
I would suggest that if you're going to do a survey, you have it available for when you're doing the community outreach in-person events. What we did with the library is that we would have those surveys that we could hand out personally. People will respond a lot more effect. There's more impact when you do it face-to-face and in person, and especially if it's something short and simple that they can just fill it out right there. The comments that I'm getting is that, some of the information is just so technical, it's going over their heads, and they're just, they look at it and they don't even attempt to read it because it just seems overwhelming to them. Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Good point. My last comment is we did just in the last couple of days kind of revamp our website. So if you're used to going there and looking for things, it's going to look a little different. But the tabs on the left are still the same. If you go into our general plan update, there was this long string of documents, starting with our mission statement and comment forms, how to participate. Then you got into volume 1, 2, 3, 4 documents. And what we've done is consolidate those volumes. How to participate is one button. When you click on that button, it opens you up the other documents. Volume 1 is all the volume 1 documents. Volume 2 is all the volume 2 documents and forward. At the very bottom of that list is the comments forms. So both in PDF and Excel. So if some people are happier working in Excel and wanting to rearrange those documents and sort them a certain way, they'll be able to do that. But like Andy said, we have almost 850 comments to date. So it's a really, really long, really tiny, but blow it up on your computer and look at it and, at least follow the comments along. A lot of them are general comment responses, because they haven't been sifted down through committees yet. So just be cognizant of that as you look at it, and don't think, oh, we're not dealing with it. No, we just haven't got there yet. So
one thing, our intent is to update that Excel spreadsheet on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
So I go through Social Pinpoint generally on Sunday and gather all the new comments, and anything that came into the GP update or in other formats, including the minutes from the various meetings, get into that comment list. So once a week it's updated with the most recent information.
And all of the staff are getting that those comments on a weekly basis, so they can see what's been said in the last week, and they're also receiving them as they come in. So it's, if you see a generic response, it's not that it hasn't been looked at, it's just that no one has had the time to provide a detailed response yet.
The other thing, we're going to basically end comments on June the 30th for this round of the general plan, so that we can assemble all these documents into a singular document draft that then will go to the Planning Commission. Doesn't mean comments can't keep coming in, but we can't, while the staff is involved in gathering the information together and putting it together, we can't be in a response mode. So for this round of the general plan, June 30th is going to be the close of comments.
Okay.
Can you, I guess I'm a little confused. There's this round, and then what would be the next round?
Well, the intent is that the committees are going through this, making their recommendation to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission will receive the entire draft general plan document for beginning of review and taking comments. So the Planning Commission will not be getting this in elements by element. It's going to be comprehensive so that you can review it comprehensively. And then, honestly, if we need to go back to committee, I mean, part of it, we'll get that done, get it to the Planning Commission, see the comments, and then really develop what is our strategy from there. We'll continue to be taking comments, but if we need to go back to committees and get specifics answered, the Planning Commission can direct that. So the format after that, we're not positive on. The intent is, though, that we'll be responsive.
Cool.
I have a quick comment for Mark. As you were scrolling through, I just happened to see and couldn't read the whole thing, the line about in yellow about Williamson Act. We do have one, at least one that I know of. I don't know if Williamson Act is currently funded by the state, but we do have somebody that is registered for Williamson Act here. So it is a relevant thing for Loomis.
It is. Christy found out before I was able to modify what's in there. Highly unusual. What's really unusual is you have no ordinance for it. I couldn't find anything in your municipal code that would represent a suggestion of that, which is highly unusual. The county has a Williamson Act code. So I'm wondering if it's just we've agreed to keep it and they just deal with the county on that. For those of you that aren't in the know, it is a mechanism wherein property taxes are set aside or reduced to allow, in order for the land to remain agricultural. This was a big deal prior to Prop 13. Following Prop 13 and the inability of an agency to simply up property taxes, I don't know if it's that big of a deal. It comes at a steep price. The developer, the property owner cannot develop the land for a period of 10 years after deciding not to renew the contract. The contracts renew every year. You can buy your way out of the contract, but it's incredibly expensive and requires a lot of things. Most Williamson Act stuff is eliminated at the time of annexation.
I thought that we had enacted something, so I pulled out my zoning ordinance, and I don't see anything under agricultural preservation right to farm. I thought we'd done something with the Williamson Act, but I don't see it either.
You do have a right to farm.
I don't see it here.
The Williamson Act, yeah. I'm not going to tell anybody. We're just going to leave it in and leave it be and move on. Don't ask, don't tell, I think, is the best policy on that one. I don't want to mess with whatever this fellow has on their property. I think it's great that you have it. It's just unusual for an incorporated agency to have these inside them. It's usually a county thing.
We like to be unusual.
I think that's wonderful. I think it's absolutely wonderful.
Anybody else have any comments?
No
All right.
hands raised.
All right. I think we got a lot accomplished. Certainly appreciate everybody's time this evening. Next meeting is going to be June 24th at 3 o'clock.
Hey,
All right. We'll see everybody later.
Good job, team.
Good night.
thank you. Bye.
Thank you all. Great job.